The morning mist clung to the still surface of Clearwater Lake, painting everything in soft shades of silver and blue. Jack Whitmore stood at the edge of the old wooden bridge, coffee mug in hand, watching the water lap gently against the pilings. That bridge wasn't just lumber and nails to him. His father had built it decades ago, plank by plank, long before Clearwater Lake had become the crown jewel of this quiet North Carolina town. For Jack, it wasn't just a crossing. It was a memory, a piece of his family stitched into the land. Jack was a carpenter by trade, but a fisherman at heart. Most mornings he'd sit on that bridge, a line dangling in the water, letting the rhythm of the lake set the pace of his day. His cabin sat just up the hill, weathered but strong, tucked beneath tall pines. He'd inherited it after his parents passed, along with the land that ran down to the dam on the southern edge of the lake. What the world didn't know, what the HOA conveniently ignored, was that dam belonged to Jack. It was on his deed, same as the bridge, same as the shoreline that stretched a good 50 yards on either side. For years, things had been quiet. Jack minded his business, kept his land clean, and let the world spin without fuss. But then came the Lakeside resort development. Sleek condos, manicured lawns, luxury docks, an entire community built on the promise of lakefront living. Families from Raleigh and Charlotte bought up the units, trading city noise for the tranquil promise of Clearwater. And along with them came the HOA. From the start, Jack and the HOA clashed. They hated his bridge, called it unsafe and an eyesore. They sent him letters, knocked on his door, and even threatened him with fines. Jack laughed the first time he read one of their notices. "Can't find me for my own damn land," he muttered, tossing it straight into the fireplace. But the HOA didn't laugh. One afternoon, Jack came down the hill and froze. His bridge, his father's bridge, was gone. Bulldozed. Splintered wood floated along the shoreline, the pilings ripped out of the water. A crew of contractors stood nearby, cleaning up the debris while a pair of HOA board members watched like hawks. Jack stormed down to the lake, fury in his eyes. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jack barked, his voice echoing across the water. "This bridge was a hazard." One of the board members replied smoothly, arms folded. "We had it removed for the safety of the community." Jack's fists clenched. "That bridge was mine. My father built it with his hands. You had no right." "You'll thank us later," the other board member said, smirking. "This resort is about progress, not rotting wood." That night, Jack sat in his cabin, staring at the deed spread out on his kitchen table. His eyes drifted down to the last page, where the boundaries of his property were inked clear as day, including the dam. A slow, dangerous smile tugged at his lips. If the HOA wanted war, they'd just picked the wrong man. The next morning, Jack drove into town. His old Ford pickup rattled over cracked asphalt, the engine coughing like it had smoked a pack a day since 1983. He parked outside the diner, the one with a flickering neon sign that read Betty's Place. Inside, the regulars were already gossiping over biscuits and gravy. As soon as Jack walked in, heads turned. Word had spread fast. "Sorry about your bridge, Jack," Old Man Clarence said from his corner booth, shaking his head. "Damn shame. HOA folks think they own the whole lake." Jack slid onto a stool at the counter. "They don't own the lake," he said flatly. "They just think they do." Betty, pouring him a steaming cup of black coffee, raised a brow. "What are you fixin' to do about it?" Jack didn't answer. Not yet. But in his gut, the fire was already burning. The HOA didn't stop with the bridge. Within a week, Jack was receiving official notices by the handful. They said his fishing shack violated community standards. His boat dock was improperly maintained. His cabin needed aesthetic upgrades. It was harassment, plain and simple. They wanted to squeeze him out, push him off his own land until the resort could swallow everything. Jack confronted them once more at their monthly meeting, held in the shiny glass clubhouse at the heart of the development. "You people think you can bully me off land that's been in my family for generations," Jack said, his voice low but steady. The HOA president, a slick-haired lawyer named Mark Ridley, leaned back in his chair with a smug grin. "We're not bullying, Mr. Whitmore. We're improving the community. And frankly, your property doesn't fit our vision. Sell to us, and we'll make it worth your while. Otherwise what?" Jack growled. Ridley's smile widened. "Otherwise, you'll keep getting those notices until the county steps in. Sooner or later, You'll realize it's easier to join us than fight us." Jack leaned across the table, his weathered hands braced against the polished wood. "You destroyed my father's bridge. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake." He paused, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Thinking I don't have options." That night, Jack walked the length of the dam under the pale glow of the moon. He knew every crack in the concrete, every rusted bolt, every lever that controlled the floodgates. The resort's twinkling lights shimmered across the lake, reflecting like diamonds in the water. He could hear laughter drifting from the clubhouse, the sound of champagne glasses clinking. And all the while, the weight of the dam pressed against him, thousands of gallons of water held in check by steel and stone. He crouched down, resting a hand on the cold metal wheel of the main valve. Just one turn, and the lake would begin to drain. Their manicured docks would sag in the mud. Their boats would be stranded in muck. Their $1.8 million resort would lose the very thing it was built on. Jack stood there for a long time, the decision heavy on his shoulders. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "This land is yours, son. Don't ever let anyone take it from you." The fire inside Jack blazed brighter. The HOA thought they had won. They had no idea how wrong they were. The storm rolled in the night. Jack made his choice. Dark clouds smothered the moon, thunder rumbled across the hills, and rain lashed against the lake in sheets. To most folks, it was just another southern summer storm. But to Jack Whitmore, it was the perfect cover. He trudged down the slope toward the dam, flashlight beam slicing through the downpour. The metal wheel glistened under the rain, slick and stubborn. Jack planted his boots, wrapped his calloused hands around it, and with a grunt, began to turn. The groan of machinery echoed like a monster waking from a long sleep. At first, nothing happened. Then came a low, hollow roar, water rushing through steel veins. The lake began to move, currents shifting, the surface swirling in restless patterns. Jack stood there, heart pounding, as the floodgates opened wider. By morning, the lake was no longer still. Its level had dropped nearly 2 feet. Docks sagged, boats tilted, and the pristine shoreline of the Lakeside resort looked like a bathtub with the plug pulled. Panic spread through the resort like wildfire. Residents spilled out onto their decks, pointing and shouting. HOA board members scrambled, cell phones pressed to their ears. By noon, Mark Ridley himself was standing on the clubhouse balcony, red-faced and barking orders. "This is sabotage," he roared to anyone who would listen. "We'll call the county, the state, whoever it takes. We'll sue him into the ground." But lawsuits and threats meant nothing against the relentless pull of draining water. Every hour, the lake sank lower, revealing ugly brown mudflats where sparkling waves had once been. Fish flopped in the shallow muck, herons stalked the receding edges, and the once idyllic view that had sold $1 million lifestyle now looked like a wasteland. Jack watched it all unfold from his cabin porch, sipping his morning coffee like it was just another day. Clarence and some of the old-timers stopped by, wide-eyed at what was happening. "Jack," Clarence whispered, voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "You really did it, didn't you?" Jack didn't answer. He just set his mug down and leaned back in his chair, the faintest hint of a grin tugging at his weathered face. By the second night, chaos reigned. Resort residents screamed at HOA board members in the clubhouse parking lot. Property values nosedived overnight as news stations set up cameras along the shrinking shore. Reporters swarmed like vultures, broadcasting images of stranded pontoon boats and muddy docks across the state. Mark Ridley cornered Jack the following morning, storming up the hill to his cabin, drenched in sweat and fury. "You've destroyed everything," Ridley shouted, pointing an accusatory finger. "You'll pay for this. We'll take your land, your house. Hell, we'll ruin you." Jack stood tall on his porch, meeting Ridley's glare with a calm steadiness that cut deeper than rage ever could. "You destroyed my father's bridge," Jack said quietly. "That bridge was part of my family. You took it from me. Now I've taken something from you." Ridley's face twisted, words caught in his throat, but Jack didn't give him the chance. He turned and walked inside, the door closing with a final, echoing thud. And outside, Clearwater Lake kept draining. By the end of the week, Clearwater Lake was no longer a lake at all. What had once been a sparkling jewel of water was now a cracked basin of mud, reeds, and broken dreams. The resort's glossy brochures, once boasting million-dollar lake views, looked like cruel jokes compared to the wasteland left behind. The HOA scrambled, calling emergency meetings, pleading with county officials, even threatening lawsuits. But the paperwork didn't lie. Jack's deed spelled it out in black and white. The dam, the gates, the water rights, all belonged to him. No law had been broken. Reporters descended on Jack's cabin like flies, shoving microphones in his face, asking if he had anything to say to the devastated homeowners. Jack gave them the same answer every time. "They destroyed my father's bridge," he said simply. "That bridge was mine. You don't take from a man what's his and expect him to bow down." The clip went viral. Across the state, and then across the country, people debated him. Some called him a villain, a bitter recluse who'd ruined lives over a pile of wood. Others called him a hero, a man who stood up against greed, against the unchecked power of HOAs. For Jack, none of that mattered. He didn't care about TV debates or internet arguments. What mattered was sitting on the porch with a fishing pole resting against the rail, watching the sun sink over land that was his, and his alone. But victory had its weight. Jack knew Clearwater would never look the same. The fish were gone. The herons had flown to deeper waters. The echo of waves against the shore was just memory now. Sometimes at night, Jack would sit awake, listening to the silence, wondering if maybe he'd gone too far. Then he'd think of his father's bridge, how the HOA men had smirked while it was torn down, how they'd spoken about his family's history like it was trash. And in those moments, doubt turned back into resolve. One evening, Clarence climbed the hill with 2 beers in hand. He sat beside Jack on the porch, the 2 men watching the last rays of daylight fade. "Never thought I'd see it," Clarence said softly. "A whole lake gone. You really showed 'em." Jack took the beer, nodded, and stared out at the muddy basin that had once held Clearwater. "They thought money could buy anything," Jack said. "But some things can't be bought. Some things you've got to protect, no matter the cost." Clarence was quiet for a moment. Then he chuckled. "They'll be telling this story for 100 years. Jack smiled faintly, the lines on his face deepening. He didn't need the world's approval. He didn't need revenge to taste sweet. All he needed was the knowledge that he'd kept his father's promise. "This land is yours, son. Don't ever let anyone take it from you." The lake was gone, but Jack's pride, and his family's legacy, remained. And as the cicadas hummed in the trees and the first stars pricked the sky, Jack Whitmore leaned back in his chair, at peace with the silence he had made.